Let's hop back to 1995. Nintendo had just released the first console ever to take advantage of binocular disparity, the phenomenon of your eyes receiving slightly different images, which is largely responsible for depth perception. This enabled their system, the Virtual Boy, to open the door to 3D gaming. So why did it fail so spectacularly? Well, the Virtual Boy assumed that depth was the only characteristic of reality. In reality, your brain simulates a world using a multitude of sensory stimuli, which it binds together to create the illusion you live in. One of the primary stimuli that the Virtual Boy failed to replicate is trichromatic light. Your eye has 3 types of color-sensitive cells called cones, which it uses in tandem to create all of the perception of color you experience in your day-to-day. The Virtual Boy, in contrast, had only one color, red. Not only is the perception of only a single color disconnected from reality, but the specific color of red is most strongly associated with danger, so it's no surprise that the common consensus was that the Virtual Boy was a discomforting experience. But there's actually another important aspect of immersing yourself into a virtual world, and it's not about the way the world looks, but rather your interactions with the world. You see, we have all of these touch and pressure receptors in our skin. We even have receptors specialized for sensing vibration, because our engagement with reality is a feedback loop, and we need externally generated signals to tell us how we're interacting with the environment. Even more so, if we're trying to build an internal model of the world, we need to witness the effects of our actions. The parts of the world that are especially important are the ones we can actually impact. And so, the brain loves agency and virtual hands and hates unskippable cutscenes. In addition to external signals, internally generated signals can be important as well. Proprioception is how you can have a sensation of where your limbs are located, even when your eyes are closed or covered by a VR headset. It's accomplished by stretch receptors in your muscles. By giving you an interface that you can control by moving your hands, modern VR uses proprioception to further convince your brain that you are really in this virtual world. But on the topic of these controllers, let me suggest you ask yourself a question. Why is it that a tiny bit of vibration is so good at convincing you that you've grabbed or touched a virtual object? To answer this, let's take a detour to one of my favorite neuroscientific studies of all time, the split brain experiments. It's the 1960s, and psychologist Michael Gazzaniga is performing an experiment on a patient who, for medical reasons, has undergone a surgery that cut their corpus callosum, the main bundle of fibers connecting the left and right hemispheres of the brain. The result is that besides a handful of much smaller connections, the left and right sides of the cortex are completely disconnected and no longer communicate with each other. The patient is still fine. They're able to go about their daily life with pretty much no problems. But because of nerve fiber crossings, or decussations, in the visual pathways, we know that what they see in their right eye will go to their left cortex, and vice versa. So when Gazzaniga shows the patient the word smile on the left side of the screen, and the word face on the right side, we know that each hemisphere only experienced one of the words. Gazzaniga then has the patient draw, and the patient's right hand draws a smiling face. The right hand was controlled by the left hemisphere, which only saw the word face. So when Gazzaniga asked why the patient did that, the patient's response was, "What do you want, a sad face? Who wants a sad face around?" This is my favorite example of Gazzaniga's left brain interpreter theory, which, to quote an article in the journal Nature, is that the left brain interpreter is what everyone uses to seek explanations for events, triage the barrage of incoming information, and construct narratives that help them make sense of the world. So when your visual cortex observes your virtual hand grabbing an object, and your sensory cortex experiences a haptic signal coming from that hand, your brain does a mind-blowingly good job at binding the sensory stimuli together into a convincing illusion, just like it does every minute with reality. That is your brain on VR. an extension of the simulation it performs in reality. To quote an incredible neuroscientist, Anil Seth, your brain hallucinates your conscious reality. Now, let's get to the second part of this video, the neuroscience of cosmic overdrive. Some of you may already be aware that in addition to my research, I've also been working on a VR game along with my close friend of around 25 years who is an incredibly talented programmer. While working on this game, we've been working together to apply a bunch of principles of neuroscience in order to make it engaging and immersive. For example, our founding principle was creating a user interface that you controlled by interacting with the game world. In Cosmic Overdrive, you control your ship by physically grabbing the ship's interface and moving it around. The end result is the feeling of the ship being an extension of you as you're snowboarding through space. This prioritization of immersion, agency, and embodiment was not easy. In order to boost, we used the player twisting their hand like revving a motorcycle as input. But for this to be reliable, we had to use some heavy theoretical math and data analysis to come up with the right equation for detecting a twist. But the hard work paid off, and now, with some haptic feedback, twisting is the best input I've personally experienced in VR. Once the hard work pays off, we're in a situation where we get to use agency in the environment as reward for the player. Destroying environmental hazards feels super satisfying, and providing the player with the ability to shoot in reward for chaining together speed power-ups has been crafted to create an incredibly addictive gameplay loop. In the creative direction of the game, I've focused on having UI elements communicated to the player based on color for the fastest possible processing, and I've put a lot of effort in creating a cool and interesting environment without overstimulating the player without too much distracting, intense brightness. We've created a dark background to contrast with the occasional sci-fi glows so that you don't get overwhelmed by the input after a few minutes of playing, which can often happen in a lot of VR titles. As well, I've taken a lot of inspiration from my favorite video game series such as Doom, Halo, as well as some of my favorite childhood games such as Metroid Fusion and Star Fox 64. So if you've been wondering where I've been the past while, this is your answer. I've been incredibly lucky to have been working with my close friend on Cosmic Overdrive. If you've ever wanted to support me, this is your chance. Check out our game's social media links in the descriptions below. We poured a lot of sweat and soul into this game, and I really think people are gonna love it. Till next time, as always, stay curious.